Coming to you from the shores of gorgeous Lake Michigan, welcome to the National Writers Series, celebrating 15 years as a year-round book festival. We are the premier home for passionate readers who love inspiring conversations with best-selling and award-winning authors. Tonight, we welcome Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. In her memoir, The Purposeful Warrior, Benson shares the lessons she's learned throughout her extraordinary career, from investigating domestic terrorist networks to becoming the youngest woman to lead a top 100 law school to running the Boston Marathon while more than 8 months pregnant. She transformed Wayne State University Law into a national leader in access and excellence. Now, as Michigan Secretary of State, she's been hailed for transforming one of the country's most outdated state departments into a national model, dramatically reducing wait times, expanding access, and overseeing two of the most transparent and secure elections in state history. Jocelyn Benson will be joined by our guest host, Doug Stanton, a #1 New York Times bestselling author of In Harm's Way and 12 Strong. Doug is an alum of Interlochen Arts Academy and co-founded the National Writers Series in 2009 with his wife Anne and attorney Grant Parsons. The National Writers Series salutes our amazing audiences, dedicated volunteers, and generous supporters for helping us raise the next generation of readers and writers through our free education programs across the region. This season of amazing authors is made possible through major support by the Green Brick Foundation, Northgard Technology Group, Golden Fowler Home Furnishings, Prout Financial, and Ward and Mary Bevins Gillette. Tonight's event is presented by Lola Jackson and Dillis Tostason Garcia. Tonight's event is sponsored by Traverse Indivisible and Leelanau Indivisible. Tonight's event is underwritten by a generous friend of the National Writers Series. Tonight's live streaming is exclusively underwritten by Nancy Davey. Thanks to our major media sponsor, the Traverse City Record Eagle, and our media partner, Interlochen Public Radio. For information on future events, programs, and how to support our nonprofit work, please visit nationalwritersseries.org. Now, please welcome to the stage #1 New York Times bestselling author, Doug Stanton.
Hey. Welcome to the Secretary of State's office. We've spruced up the place. We put in a cash bar and nice chairs. I've taken my number. Did you get your number at the door? Those of you who followed directions and got your real ID can cut ahead in the signing line later tonight. My name is Doug Stanton. Thank you, Kendall, for that introduction. I'm so pleased to see you here to talk about The Purposeful Warrior by Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. It's really a book about her journey from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to working in Lansing in state government. And it's quite a fascinating journey. I've had a lot of fun reading this book, and I'm excited to talk to her. I was just talking to her backstage. She's very complimentary on what you all are doing here, and also I was telling her about the Battle of the Books, which her son is almost old enough to be in. We have a very short video. Some of you may know about Battle of the Books, but if you don't, this is kind of probably our best year of doing it, and this is what we produced for Battle of the Books 2025. If we could roll it now, then I'll come back and we'll be on with our guest of honor.
Books is a program here in northern Michigan that targets 4th and 5th graders to get them engaged in reading and excited about reading books. It's so exciting. We have 54 teams behind me here. Most of the teams have about 5 or 6 kids on the team, so you do the math and you get to pretty close to 300 kids. So we actually have 3 competitive events. One is called Team Battles, where they're really going head to head against another team on what are the facts of this book. And then we have a second event that's also competitive, where we put a whole bunch of teams in a room and run it a little like a live Jeopardy round. And then our third event is our creative one, where the kids can take some details from one of the books they read and make a skit about it, or they can do a drawing. So they're doing lots of stuff today.
So the Battle of the Books, I think, is one of our community's biggest book clubs. And what it really is doing is modeling behavior for very young readers at an early age that they can carry with them throughout high school and into their work life, because everyone has to be a good reader. Everyone needs to be able to stand up and tell a story and speak their own voice, and they're learning that right behind us now in all this kind of interaction they're having with each other, their judges, and most of all, the books. They read all these books and they study them, and it bonds them. I mean, one of the biggest benefits is the young people find their place by coming to the Battle of the Books here in Traverse City. What I find most exciting about Battle of the Books is just the fun the kids have in being themselves, you know, with their costumes, their makeup, their wigs, their shoes they wear, the names. I've seen it evolve over the years, and it's just gotten really better and better.
The amazing things I think about this program is that it's free to the kids who are participating. We give them a free set of books, and to be here and everything they experience today is free. And how do we do that? Well, we have the volunteers that we talked about, but we have a lot of cool roles in our volunteer group, some folks that are judging some of these competitions, as well as a lot of high school kids who maybe previously did Battle of the Books, helping us set up and tear down and run scores to our scorekeepers. So it's a lot of fun. We also have our donors and supporters, and a lot of times we have the same people coming back year after year to support this program, and we are so grateful.
So every dollar you put into the Battle of the Books is a multiplier. It comes out, you know, to the multiple on the other end, because you can see the excitement. The books are provided for free. The judges volunteer, but we really rely on the good graces of our neighbors on Main Street and everywhere to carry this forward. And that's our hope, that you see behind me the next generation of teachers, of writers, of storytellers, and also of hopefully supporters.
That's a wrap on Battle of the Books 2025, our 10th year of hosting Battle of the Books in Traverse City, Michigan. Now more than ever, events like this are an amazing resource for kids in our community. It brings them together, they develop lifelong friendships through a shared love of reading, and are engaged in an enriching, creativity-building activity for an entire Saturday. And they even got to meet author Lindsay Curry. It's an amazing event, and we appreciate anyone who looks to support it.
Thank you. Your participation in events like this helps support what you just saw on screen. It is changing lives, and it looks like a lot of fun too, right? Listen, without further ado, as soon as our glacier continues to recede here, we need some screen music. Without further ado, please welcome to the stage Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. Well, that's certainly a warm welcome.
Thank you, Traverse City. Great to see you all.
Welcome to the National Writers Series stage.
It's such an honor to be here. And what you have put on is such an incredible series of writers, bringing them to Traverse City, really amplifying the arts and how important it is to not just read, but invest in good stories.
True. In that video we just saw, talks a lot about the educational outreach we're working on. So thank you all, and thank you for that nice compliment. I have a question, though. What does the Secretary of State do?
Well, I'm the Chief Motor Vehicle Officer for the state of Michigan, which makes me very popular. I run the DMV, which means that everyone loves to come and see me. But in reality, I'm also, we have actually transformed the DMV. So,
you have?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
A tremendous opportunity, I think, this job. I love it. It's the best job I've ever wanted and will ever have, quite frankly, because I get to wake up every day doing one of two things. One, saying, how can I make government work well for people, make it easier for you to get your license and save you time, save you money. I hope everyone got their real ID. And also, the other side of my job is I'm the Chief Election Officer for the state of Michigan, which means in challenging moments like this, and let's be real, democracy is having a moment. In challenging moments like this, I get to stand up and take on anyone, no matter how rich or powerful, to protect the voices and votes of every citizen. So
you've been interested in election law since on your way to Harvard, when you entered Harvard in what, 2001?
Yes. 2001 is when fall of 2001 was when I started law school. Yes.
Yeah. In fact, you were in Justice Kagan's criminal procedures class on September 11th, 2001.
Justice Kagan was my civil procedure professor, and among other things, I mean, she ultimately became the dean at Harvard Law School when I was there, but she was my Civ Pro professor and was the professor. I was in her class at 10 a.m., began at 9:50, I still remember, on 9/11, September 11th, 2001.
Your folks lived about 60 miles south of Shanksville, PA, right?
Yeah.
That day seemed to really have affected you. You talked about not being able to walk back to your dorm.
I mean, it was my first week in law school. I didn't know where I was, and I remember leaving Professor Kagan's class, and someone came up to me and announced that classes were canceled the rest of the day, and I sort of was in this fog, went up to him, and I said, "Does anything else happen?" Because we were in a class. The first tower fell, the class began, and he said, "The second tower has also fallen," and I remember how that felt, and he said, "And something happened in Pittsburgh," and I was just like, my parents are in Pittsburgh. And so I stumbled, we didn't have cell phones really then, and I stumbled into an office and called my parents, and they said they were okay, and then I went back to my dorm room, and at the same time, my husband, I hadn't met him yet, but my husband, Ryan Friedrichs, was down the street at the Kennedy School of Government, similarly learning that people he went to school with here in Michigan were in the towers, Todd Wida and others, and that ultimately, this is in a chapter of the book called Finding Purpose in Rage. He actually found a purpose in that moment and ultimately signed up to be a member of the military. This was a while later, but it was part of his story of how he could find purpose in that moment. And he joined the military not necessarily to fight, but to save people's lives. He became a combat medic. Right. His job, and the reason he joined was because he felt too many people were bearing the burden of these wars. He wanted to serve so that someone else didn't have to leave their family and go back to deployment.
You dropped him off at the airport, right?
And he deployed, and then but his job and his focus was on bringing as many people alive home as he could.
You do have that chapter. We talk about channeling rage. Positively. I think there's another moment in your life. Let's talk for a moment about the 2000 election with Secretary of State Katherine Harris.
Yeah.
You're right, and that seems to have really bothered you or affected you, because at that moment it was an epiphany, like, oh, this is what a Secretary of State could do. Am I correct in thinking that way?
I think if you all remember the 2000 election, it was 25 years ago, but a pivotal moment for the history of our democracy, because we saw for the first time as a country how a Secretary of State could block a recount from happening, thereby blocking a full and accurate account of the votes of Florida and impacting an entire presidential election. So for me at that moment, finding purpose in my rage over that election meant saying, well, what if a Secretary of State was in that position and did everything right, did everything by the books, followed the law, protected the voice of the people, not knowing that 20 years later, I would find myself in what was ultimately the Florida of the 2020 election cycle here in Michigan, standing up to a then President of the United States to protect the voices and the votes of the people of Michigan and being a force for protecting the vote and protecting accurate elections in that pivotal moment. And if I could add, the heart of both of those stories is about not giving up. It's about times in which horrible things could happen that could be designed to veer us off our course. But if we can actually find purpose in those challenging moments, whatever they may be, and use them to find a path forward, that it can actually propel us to do more than we otherwise wouldn't have done. And so that to me was the lesson of that moment, the power of finding purpose in your rage.
You talk about retreat or press forward as well in the book. You're able to really chart, these nuggets to think about with this personal story, which I find fascinating. What do your parents think of all this? They're special ed teachers.
They're my parents. They want me to be safe and happy and healthy and nearby. They call often. They want to meet they want to see their grandson as often as possible.
Do you call them?
Of course. I was just in Pittsburgh over the weekend.
What do you talk about when you what's the dinner table? Yeah. Are you what?
Are you getting sleep? Are you getting enough sleep? So yeah, that's their parents. In the same way I am with my son as well, which really, if anyone knows, that's where you really find out how much your parents do love you when you are a parent yourself and find the pride and love in being a parent.
Did they model any behavior? I know there were special ed teachers, and I think they stood up for rights of students who needed.
They were special education teachers in public schools in Pittsburgh, and they gave me memories of being special ed teachers. I would come home, I would see how hard they work every night, filling out IEPs for their kids, talking to parents about what their kids needed, fighting for the kids in their classroom to get quality education. So it really instilled in me a sense of responsibility that we all have to make sure everyone has a seat at the table, that every voice is heard, and that everyone has a fair shot to make it. And that's what they fought for as educators. That's what I've tried to fight for as a public servant here in Michigan.
How did you go from that kitchen table in Pittsburgh to Wellesley College in Wellesley, Massachusetts?
I had an English teacher in 10th grade.
10th grade?
I was a sophomore in high school. Well, I think he ultimately went to Williams College, I believe, and at a college fair, he was a great mentor and really believed in me and gave me opportunities to help me start believing in myself as a young, teenage girl in public school in Pittsburgh. And at a college fair, he went to Williams, and he was talking about Williams, but he was right next to Wellesley, the table for Wellesley. And I was walking by, and truth be told, I really wanted to go to Notre Dame. That was my dream. And he was like, go here. And I took a pamphlet and visited and really loved the idea of being at a school that was about training leaders and training women to be voices and leaders and powerful ones.
You actually one of the few students to become part of the city government in Wellesley, Mass. While you were a college student. Mm-hmm. What did you do?
Voices weren't being heard. Student voices weren't being heard. Decisions were being made without the input of the college community. And so I've always seen politics as an opportunity to ensure everyone has a seat at the table. That's why I love democracy and became, the chief election officer of our state. But as a young college student, I felt that the student voice needed to be heard at that town meeting. And so I ran, because it's what you do. You can run for office. And I actually ran as a write-in candidate. And I called every single voter, and I won. And it was a... I did. I was very
Was this your first election?
Yeah, it was. Yes. I mean, I was like 19 or something, 18. So yes, it was the first time I'd run for office. But it was really a sort of an exercise in just saying, well, I think voices need to be heard, and here's a path to making sure that's the case, and it's still obviously true today in any opportunity to run for public office.
You also started a group called the Conference of Women's Voices.
A conference about political activism, a nonpartisan gathering. It was called Women in Political Activism at Wellesley, and so it's now annual conference where we bring. At that point, we brought Democratic and Republican women leaders to to Wellesley to talk with young students about how to find their voice and leverage their voice, whether it be in domestic politics, international policy, local politics.
Were your brothers and sisters this ambitious, or were you?
I have a younger brother. He's a musician.
Okay. Yeah.
He went into the arts, but no, I think I'm just really impatient. Essentially, I see, and when I see something that's wrong, I want to do everything I can to fix it. And to me, there's nothing that gets under my skin more than seeing people with a voice, with a story to be told, with a path that deserves protection, and seeing those voices go unheard. To me, we're always at our best as a country when every voice is at the table, and the policy decisions that have always been some of the most detrimental to our economy, to our country, have been when voices have been excluded and decisions made without their input and voice. So that's been the crux of everything I've tried to do. How do we want to make sure government is treating people fairly? We make sure every voice is heard. That's what's best going to drive the political process.
I have a question. You said something you wanted to go to Notre Dame. You also wrote that you went to church on Sundays and mass during the week. So you had a Catholic Protestant kind of upbringing. Do you consider yourself a religious person necessarily?
I certainly, my faith is a driving force in being able to do this work, in building a life as a public servant, and having faith that with all the variables of politics today, because it's a very noisy, challenging environment that is in many ways, I believe, designed to drive sincere, authentic voices out. But in trying to stay in and stay who I am, it's my family and faith that enables me to do that, as well as building relationships with others who are similarly trying to just do as much good as we can with the time that we're given.
What do you, I know that you're married to Ryan Friedrichs.
Friedrichs. Yeah.
And you had your wedding rehearsal in a baseball stadium.
I wanted to have the whole wedding at Comerica Park, but we got married on Belle Isle. Judge Damon Keith, if anyone remembers Judge Keith.
Yeah.
Civil rights icon. He actually performed the wedding at Belle Isle, but our rehearsal dinner was at Comerica Park because we love baseball.
You both love baseball.
I think I love it more than him. But he comes along.
How did you meet Ryan? Where?
We met in election law and policy classes. I was in the law school at Harvard. He was at the Kennedy School. And we were both arguing against each other about whether there should be open primaries. He's from Michigan. He grew up in Ann Arbor. And his mom is from Marquette. So it's a full, family. His mom's, Ann, is here tonight. Lives in Traverse City. So yeah, we met arguing about whether there should be open primaries in politics, and he was talking from Michigan's standpoint, which again has open primaries and the benefits of that. So
okay,
debating
interesting. You also wrote a book called "The State Secretaries of State," which now before you run out and buy it, let me tell you, When I read about you, you seem really intrigued by policy. You're driven by policy, by making change. It's almost as if you got into politics through that channel as opposed to being a power. You wanted to be just in power for its own sake.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
But this book, State Secretaries of State, tell us about that, because you went around the whole country and interviewed all the secretaries of state and asked them what they did?
Yeah, I love solving problems, but I'm very methodical about it, and I love data, and I love best practices. I love not recreating the wheel, but looking at past attempts and trying to do things better. It's kind of how you run stuff, whether it's a business or an educational institution or a government. And so in wanting to tell the story after the 2000 election about how secretaries of state are not only pivotal to making sure our democracy works, but also communicating to everyone, hey, we vote for these people, we select these people, and too often we don't realize the power we're giving them. I interviewed every sitting secretary of state in the country and tried to tell the story of whether they were a Democrat or Republican, how they were using their offices to amplify people's voices and do good, with an eye towards inspiring others to not just care about these races, but also perhaps run themselves. And lo and behold, my last interview was with Jennifer Brunner, who was at that point the Ohio Secretary of State. And I remember turning off my tape recorder and saying, okay, I want to do this job.
That's how you came to
I was
it.
a young law professor, right? I didn't come from a political family, but I knew how to do the job, and I knew how to do it well, having learned from all these other secretaries. And so it was really a testament to the people of Michigan that I could travel around the state, talk to people, including here in Traverse City and elsewhere, and say, this is my vision for the office. But it always was from a mission-driven, impact-driven approach, not really interested in titles or positions, but more in what you could do with those positions to do a lot of good for the people.
So you wrote that, I think, in 2010.
2008.
2008.
Yeah.
You ran for office in 2010 and didn't win that time. You were 33 years old, maybe?
Yeah, and yet I was the top Democratic vote getter that year. I think the Democratic candidate for governor lost by 16 points. I lost by 4. And so I outperformed the ticket by 12 points, and that really was when people were like, oh, maybe we should pay attention to these races. And then by the time it was open again and I ran in 2018, I feel like people were just like, give it to her already. Like, just let her have them. Like, everyone was tired of hearing from me about how important these offices were. And it is the best job to me. I have loved every day, despite the noise and having to be in the political arena and all the challenges that brings, I get to, again, make sure people get their real IDs, right? And can fly and just demonstrate government can work for you. And when you're asked, and my goal as Secretary of State is to make sure, if you are asked, does government work for you? Is it on your side? That you can point to our office and say, yes, it is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have a thought experiment. Follow my vote for a moment.
Okay.
Let's say I go into the booth, I cast my vote. Where does it go from there?
It's a paper ballot. It goes into the machine. It is then secured and tabulated. And then after that election is over, the unofficial results are released. And then there's a canvassing process in which the clerks actually make sure that the ballots confirm with the numbers in the machines. And then you have a certification process. And then your ballot is potentially part of an audit, a post-election audit. After the certification, we did over 250 of these audits, state and local, in the 2020 election cycle. And that, again, is used to both make sure procedures are followed and that the results of the vote is an accurate reflection of the will of the people.
Where do the paper ballots go once I cast it?
They're secured in a secure environment. No, you can't have access to them unless you're an election official.
Is there an air gap then somehow between, how does it get from there to the...
We have specific rules about the chain of custody.
I'm really curious about this.
Yeah, we have specific rules. I would encourage you to be a poll worker so that you can see firsthand all of you should be, because then you can actually sort of see firsthand how there are record-keeping requirements and other things to make sure those ballots are secure and that the chain of custody is secure. And so, I think it's critical that we have those security provisions in place and that it's a unique expertise that really only clerks and election officials can rightly have access to, because we want to make sure that chain of custody remains secure.
It's out, and I think my question, I think a lot of people wonder, what happens when I vote? Where does it go?
And I should answer that is if you vote in person at an early voting site or on election day. If you vote from home and mail in your ballot or drop it at a drop box, there's a bit of a, obviously if you drop it at a drop box, the drop boxes are checked once a day during the election cycle, and then there's only certain people who could even go to those drop boxes and bring those in. So there's another sort of side of it before a ballot gets to the machine, but all of that, there are rules and procedures protecting the chain of custody and security of those ballots along the way.
Chain of custody, sure. Yeah. So let's talk about that for a moment. 2018, the voters of Michigan amended the Constitution to allow unlimited mailing of...
To allow anyone who wants to vote from home to be able to do so.
Right.
And be able to request from their clerk the ability to get a ballot. And that was expanded to create a permanent request list in 2022 so that you can simply just say, I always want you to send me my ballot before any election, so you don't have to re-request it every year.
So in 2019, right, we sent out 7.1 million. This is why we're here to talk. So clarify this. Because they think the same thing.
So in 2020, which was our first major election with those laws in place, 5.5 million Michiganders voted in that election. Of those, 3.3 million voted from home in the midst of a global pandemic, right? 3.3 million, which is a whole other conversation about how we made sure those ballots were secured and counted effectively. And I'm really proud, by the way, that with more people voting than ever before and 2/3 of people voting from home, meaning at that point those ballots couldn't even be opened and counted until election day, we still had our results in, our unofficial results in, within 24 hours of the polls closing. So we did that efficiently and effectively, and kudos to our clerks and our team for doing that.
So you had mentioned you'd been criticized by the then president, and I think you write in the book that you got a tweet. Right, you woke up and looked at
I don't know, criticized is kind of, he kind of attacked me. But yeah, criticized, yes, he in May 20 of, so the second chapter of my book is called Going Rogue, because I was famously called by the former and now current president, the rogue Secretary of State from Michigan. he said, I woke up one day, and remember the days when like you got a letter from the president, you would hang it on the wall and be like, oh my gosh, Ronald Reagan, vote to me, and it's the family heirloom, right? This is when I received a letter from Richard Nixon. So it was very strange to get like a tweet from the president of the United States saying that I had sent out ballots to all of Michigan's residents, which I hadn't done. I had sent out information to all registered voters on how to vote by mail, just like my Republican colleagues in Iowa and West Virginia and Ohio. Right. So it wasn't anything that was particularly controversial. It then became controversial through misinformation. And then he threatened to withhold federal funding from the entire state of Michigan as a result of this act, which I actually hadn't done. And so I remember waking up and just thinking, it's scary. It's scary when, no matter how that threat comes, when it comes. And so I had a moment, I talk about in this book, when things happen outside of our control and we get attacked, or, it's okay to be scared. It's okay to want to go back under the covers and wish it never happened, as I did. Those feelings are real, and I think you need to sit with them as long as you need. And then allow logic or truth to set in. And for me that morning, I was like, wait a minute. I didn't send out ballots to every voter. I sent out information on how they could vote from home in the midst of a pandemic, just like my colleagues in other states. So I sort of level set and wrote back to the president.
What time of the day is it when you're doing this?
This was like 10 minutes later.
No, maybe.
I don't know. You could look at the timestamp on the tweets. But it wasn't. I didn't workshop it with anyone. I just was like, okay,
So who's your counsel here? Your husband or you?
No, I was just like, I have to respond, and it was sort of the part of me kicked in that said, okay, none of this is true. I need to correct the record. Maybe it was the legal side of me, I'm not sure. But I remember, I think I went from like my bed to my bathroom and was like, it eventually just said, okay, this is what I'm going to say. Hi. I didn't send out ballots. I sent out information on how to request voting from home, just like my Republican colleagues in Iowa and West Virginia and in Ohio. By the way, my name is Jocelyn Benson. Feel free to use it. As opposed to, because part of a bullying tactic is to dehumanize, right? And to not use our names, to not realize we're real people here. And so I also said, and by the way, my name is Jocelyn Benson, I would appreciate it if you'd correct the results or correct your tweets. So he did attempt to do that. It didn't. It was, and then he wrote back and said, "Oh, she just sent out, I don't know, request forms." And then I wrote back again, and I was like, "Okay, you're still wrong." At this point, we're like pen pals on Twitter, like backing back and forth. We didn't send out ballots. We just sent out information. And by the way, my name is Jocelyn Benson. And so it became this sort of just reaction of trying to speak truth to power, but it metastasized into the first of many moments throughout the 6-7 months that followed of me as this lowly state election official having to stand up to the President of the United States, who was trying to misinform the public about their voice, their votes, and the accuracy of the election. And I'm really proud, again, we worked with 1,500 clerks all around the state to continue to speak the truth, because at the end of the day, I want voters to trust the results of the election, to know that their voice counts, that their vote matters. And it was scary every step of the way. It culminated, of course, at the end of the year with people showing up, armed protesters outside my home, who had been so galvanized by this noise and these threats that they wanted to take it upon themselves to call on me to come out and face them. And that really underscores the ramifications.
Talk about that night for a moment. It's December 6, 2020, right? You're putting up Christmas decorations in the house. What did you hear first when you're sitting inside your house?
So it started with a phone call from the Attorney General saying, we just received a bulletin or a tip that some female politician is going to, or female leader is going to have armed protest outside their home. And we didn't know who it was, and we were all just sort of preparing and decided to just sort of put out the call when we knew who it was. And then about maybe 45 minutes later, the chant started. And I was inside just trying to hang up Christmas decorations. My son was watching How the Grinch Stole Christmas, the Benedict Cumberbatch version. There's like multiple versions now. That was the one, our favorite. And the chant started, and I remember, as a mom, your first thought goes to keeping your kids safe, and also making sure they're not afraid or they don't panic And so this 4-year-old little boy, right, just wanted to, and so I just picked him up, took him upstairs, started running the bathwater very loudly so that he couldn't hear the noise. And then all the time was on the phone with the Attorney General trying to figure out could we get law enforcement there. Michigan State Police had given us the tip. Why weren't they there yet? And kudos to Attorney General Nessel for never getting off the phone for the entire 45 minutes, trying to get as many people as she could to keep me safe, which was her job, and I'm always be grateful to her for that. And so all that said, that night was very harrowing, and it was very scary, because at any point I didn't know, is a bullet going to go through our window? Is something, are they going to storm our house? For 45 minutes it was just a neighborhood security guard standing between my family and this growing crowd of armed protesters.
What did they want?
Well, it was live streamed on Facebook, so anyone can go watch it if you want to. But they were calling on me to come outside and show myself, to confront them, and I think ultimately were trying to intimidate me, make me scared from certifying the election, and pushing for the certification of the election that the Board of State Canvassers would be voting on, or had voted on, and then we'd be sending the electors to the National Archives. And so I had a moment when I was going through all this, and I realized these folks aren't protesting me. They're protesting the idea that the people of Michigan voted for a candidate that they didn't like. They're protesting the results, the results of this election. And my job as Secretary of State is to proudly stand in defense and protect those results, no matter what they may be, because my job is to protect the voices and the votes of the people of Michigan. So once I connected to that mission, I suddenly didn't find myself so afraid, but really more determined and emboldened to protect those results by any means necessary, and protect my family at the same time, which I was able to do, and demonstrate that, in moments like that, we have to be prepared to stand up for what we believe in, and to stand firm in our values, and to protect and the people and the votes of the people of Michigan.
When things like this happen, do you talk with your staff? Do you talk with
Yeah.
clergy? I mean, do you sit around and have a cup of coffee and say, that chanting outside the house is just really it's a bummer, and what are we going to do about it? I mean,
honestly,
it's all you, right?
It is and it isn't, because I have other women that I'm serving with, Governor Whitmer, Attorney General Nessel, Senator Debbie Stabenow, and the unfortunate reality oftentimes of being a woman in public eye and a leader in an executive role in particular is that you do have to deal with threats. Just a month or 2 months before that, we had dealt with the kidnapping attempt and the threats. And so connecting with others who understood what it was like and building strength through those connections, solidarity, was key and critical. And so I have a book called Knowing Your Tribe, or Build Your Tribe, about the women of Michigan, and how really one of the best parts about my job these last several years has been getting to work with women leaders like Governor Whitmer, like Attorney General Nessel, like Senator Stabenow, like Senator Alyssa Slotkin, and really build that solidarity, supporting each other.
Right.
And it's been a real sisterhood. Even we don't always agree. We don't always agree with each other, but there's always a sense that we'll have each other's back, and we'll be there to just, touch gloves when we need it.
You've run into this before.
Can I also just say shout out to State Rep Betsy Kofia as well,
Yeah.
Who has been one of those women for me.
I think you've run into this before when you worked at the Southern Poverty Law Center in Montgomery, Alabama. After Wellesley, you had this fascinating, I think, job of being a journalist that was tasked with interviewing Nazi sympathizers.
An
Is that
undercover, investigator into extremist organizations. And yes, and so I had very visceral moments of being in Spartanburg, South Carolina, at the young age of 20, had just spent the whole day tracking these movements and plans to commit crimes by folks who had been mobilized by a hateful ideology to harm other people. And I was really afraid that they were going to find out. I was tracking all this information, planning to expose, write a story on it, and hand it over to the FBI. And I was really afraid they were going to figure it out and come and kill me. And I had this moment, just lying there all by myself in this little Red Roof Inn in Spartanburg, South Carolina. What am I going to do? Am I going to run? Am I going to stop doing this work because it's too scary? Or am I going to get to work and actually write an article that would expose what they were planning and stop it? And instead of lying there just feeling scared, I decided to get up and get to work. And that's what I did. I wrote the article that ultimately brought the organization down and halted their plans. And it was a lesson for me about leaning into courage, even in moments of great fear. That actually, trying to stifle fear isn't helpful. It's important to recognize fear and actually use it as an opportunity to be courageous.
Where did you learn this, though? Did you learn this? I agree, but how do you model that behavior if you've never seen it before? Had you seen it? I mean, I've been on a...
Yeah, well, I mean, I was that entire year living in Montgomery, Alabama, and that was very close to Selma. And it was never lost on me as I learned and watched Eyes on the Prize, listened to audiobooks and read Taylor Branch's novels about the civil rights movement, that throughout history is filled with stories of people choosing courage over fear and achieving great things for everyone when they do. And so for me, I've always thought of the folks that stood at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge in March of 1965, John Lewis and others marching straight forth into a sea of Alabama state troopers, knowing they would likely get hurt or worse, because they believed in the courage of their convictions and the power of the vote and the importance of our Constitution being followed. So to me, all I've ever wanted to be, and I said a prayer in Selma earlier that year in Alabama, that I could simply do whatever I could any time in my life to have been the type of person that would have stood at the foot of that bridge in March of 1965. That's it. Am I someone who would have shown up that day and marched forward anyway? And where is the foot of the bridge today? And so that's, to me, what ultimately the book's about, right? Like saying, where are we called upon to fight in this moment of history? And are we willing to do the courageous thing that so many folks before us did to enable us to be here now?
Well, it's interesting, Jocelyn, you really do seem driven by ideas. Yeah. Like, some people might say what you just said, God, it's the adrenaline. I love being out there. I love the street fight. I love the combat.
I don't.
You don't?
I don't.
No, but
I love helping people. I mean, I know that sounds cheesy, but if someone else's life is made better because I threw myself into the fire, then I will have accomplished something, right? That's really what the measure is.
We're going to go to questions in just a moment for the audience, but I just wanted to first thank you for being here, and I know the audience probably has a lot that they want to ask you. I wanted to ask you, though, are you still running?
Oh, yes. I ran the London Marathon a few weeks ago.
The London?
London. The largest marathon ever in history. It was amazing. It was I ran it in support of an organization called Grassroots Soccer, which is an adolescent health organization that uses soccer to empower people with mental health information and other types of information about how to build healthy lives. And I'll be running the New York Marathon in the fall as well. So yes, I actually ran today on this wonderful trail here in Traverse City.
Did you really?
My favorite thing to do when I come here. Seeing all of you wonderful people is also part of what I love coming here. But running that trail, I mean, and I was actually I just did the Charlevoix, Michigan races as well a few weeks ago in Petoskey.
Do people recognize you when you're running on the trail?
Yes. I think. I don't know if anyone saw me out there today. But I mean,
you take
yes.
pains to.
Well, I mean, so when I ran the Boston Marathon pregnant, for a couple of times, every time I would run a race after that, especially in Michigan, people would come up to me and say, thank you, because you did it. Now, I'm running this half marathon and I'm 2 months along, but I believe I can still do it, and so it was, so yes, I think, I enjoy running as a great opportunity to it's a great metaphor for life for me about just putting one foot in front of the other. Every time I've run probably over 35 marathons now, every time I start a race, I'm always uncertain that I can finish it. I always get nervous. I always doubt myself. I always get a little emotional and sort of overwhelmed with what I'm about to do. And I don't know if I'll be able to finish, because you don't know when you start any path, any journey, if you're going to get to the destination. But by one foot in front of the other, methodically and intentionally, every time I've gotten there, every time I've finished. And it always reminds me that we can achieve so much more than we realize when we start out on a journey. And all what's really asked of us in that moment is to take the first step.
It probably also helped that your husband gave you a book called The Pregnant Athlete.
Yeah, well, it's his fault, yeah. and my doctor who said, you should still run. But it was, I didn't actually even tell anyone other than sort of people closest to me that I was even running the Boston Marathon while pregnant, because I wasn't running it to necessarily even complete it. I just wanted to see how far I could go. And Wellesley, my alma mater, is the halfway point. And so I thought, I at least want to try to get there. But even if I just run 1 mile, I'll always be able to say I ran a mile of the Boston Marathon 8 months pregnant. And then once I finished that, I ran another mile and then another mile. And then before I knew it, I was approaching the finish line. And I remember turning and I saw this gentleman I had met at the beginning of the race. He was 86 years old. And there we were, stumbling along together. 9 of us thought, 6 hours earlier that we were going to be at the finish line. And we looked at each other and we sort of smiled and nodded and then kept going. And again, just a reminder that we can often do far more than we realize. And running for me is a reminder to keep pushing, to keep striving, to keep believing in sort of the promise of transformative ideas to make things better, even when it seems impossible.
Do you have hobbies that you like to do besides
I like
running?
to run.
You like to run?
Yeah. So here's the thing. My son loves roller coasters, right? He loves roller coasters. And I asked him once, and so a lot of our hobby is like going to roller coaster parks with him. He wants to build an amusement park someday and all this stuff. He draws roller coasters on the chalk on the driveway. And so I asked him, my husband and I were driving to Cedar Point recently, and we turned around and said, how is this young little boy, why is it that you love roller coasters so much? And how are you so brave to be able to ride them? And he said, I love roller coasters because they make me feel afraid, and when I'm afraid, I realize how to be brave. And so it was a constant way to try to build up his courage and to find that strength and build that bravery muscle. And so it was also another lesson of the impact of building a courageous life that, then our kids see that too, and they want to try to be brave too, and they want to put themselves in situations where they can be brave and take on those fears. And that really is, our hobby. But it was beautiful to see our son really connect riding roller coasters with an opportunity to be fearful, therefore an opportunity to be brave.
Do you have a certain kind of music you like to listen to? Are you a
So
classical
I'm
fan
also
or
a
rock?
mom, and so we listen to a lot of Disney music. But I really love 80s music. I really love Motown as well. I just those like the beats that
I was going to ask you, what does your high school senior picture look like?
Oh my gosh, I had curly hair. That's all I remember. I'm sure we can find one and post it. But I was really, I was just one of those folks who just really wanted to do as much as I could with the time I was given. So I was in the theater club and editor of the yearbook and all those other things. But yeah, I've always loved to just fill my time with trying to do as many things as I can.
That's entirely apparent. Well, thank you so much for talking right now.
Thank you.
We're going to go to questions
Doug.
from the audience. We could bring up the house lights. Wow, what a great crowd. There are 2 microphones, one here and one there. Please walk up to it if you can. If you can't come, raise your hand. We'll bring the mic to you. Just say your name, ask a question, try not to give a speech. Anyone?
I think we have someone coming.
Oh, there we go.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Rich Perlberg. I compliment you on your book. I never read it, but I read about it. It was great. I'm trying.
You're going to get a copy tonight, so you get to read it.
No, I mean the first one.
The Secretary's that bestseller. Yeah.
I'm trying not to ambush you, but there was a story today that broke about the former president of the University of Michigan, who was rejected by the Florida State Board, and he was rejected as the president of the University of Florida. You seem surprised by that. I just read it out in the lobby. Mostly because he supported DEI, but he had tried to back away from it. He said he evolved from DEI, and he was trying to thread the needle, and it didn't work. And so I guess my question to you as a purposeful warrior, what is the proper role to take? Do you try to accommodate the mega group? Do you try to work with them? Or do you actually resist at all opportunities? We have a governor who hugged the president. I don't think John Lewis would have hugged George Wallace. If you were governor, would you hug Donald Trump?
Okay, so there's a lot in there. Let's unpack that. So I want to start by saying I just sort of step back and root in who we are and who we are when we're at our best, most economically prosperous, and strongest as a nation. And I believe, and this is why, I think, I align with Congressman Lewis and so many others who've come before us, that we're at our best when everyone has a voice. We are at our best when everyone is included. We are at best when everyone, no matter who they are or what they look like or where they come from or who they love, feels safe and included and that they matter. So, that's visceral to me. And what I love about the work that I do now as the Secretary of State is my job is to make sure that no matter who you are or who you vote for or where you live, that you can get good government service and that you can vote with ease and that your voice is heard and your vote is counted. That's the essence of my work, and that's what I get to show up every day trying to do. So that is who I've always been, and been willing to stand up to anyone, no matter how powerful or how wealthy, who would run amok of that concept. Because I know that the best way I can ensure our economy is strong is by making sure everyone has a fair shot to succeed in our economy. The best way I can ensure we're educating our next generation to take on the battles of tomorrow and solve the real problems facing our country is to make sure that no matter who you are or where you live, you have access to quality education. So that's who I am, and that's who I'm always going to be. I'll always work with anyone with optimism and hope that is aligned with those same values to get us to where we need to be, to have a strong economy and a good education system and a healthy democracy. And I'll stand up to anyone who gets in the way as well. And that's sort of just the bottom line.
But will you hug them? But will you hug them?
I would say
You don't have to. I mean, you don't have to
it's
hug
hard
anybody.
to it's hard to it's hard to answer that sort of broad general question other than saying it depends what precedes the hug. Like if they just told me they're going to, rob our citizens of their rights and freedoms, probably not. So it really just the context matters. And to me, again, the answers to how I'll be as governor have been answered to how I've been as Secretary of State, which has been unequivocal in standing up for the rights and freedoms of everyone and making sure government can work well for everyone throughout our state.
Thank you. Next question.
I guess that's me. I'm Betty Wadlin from Charlevoix, and the county just north of us in the 2020 election, there was a mistake made.
Antrim County?
Antrim County, 6,000 votes.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, and so I've talked to people who voted for Trump, and they give the example of Antrim County as being the bed of voter fraud, and they bring up the 6,000 votes. So I tried to talk to her, but how did it happen? And I tried to explain, but I think you would do a really good job of explaining that.
Yeah. I will say, so in Antrim County in 2020, there was a software glitch at the county level in which the clerk had not downloaded the upgraded system, and that led to a momentary glitch in the results that were subsequently fixed right away. And to reinforce the accuracy of those results, we did audits. We actually did a full hand count audit of all the paper ballots that reaffirmed those results. And so the truth is there for anyone who is willing to see it. Yeah. And the audit results are posted at michigan.gov/vote, and you can read through all those details. We are in this moment of an era of misinformation, and also an era of, I think, especially when leaders refuse to accept the accurate results of an election, it validates followers who would like to do the same. But it doesn't change the truth, and I think it's important for us to both be transparent, help present all the evidence. People can make their own decisions for themselves. And then also invite people to work the elections next time so that they can see all the procedures that are in place to protect the accuracy of the process.
Okay. If you don't mind, just one more thing. I'd like to know what you think of ranked choice voting.
I believe there is a ballot initiative being explored in this moment to implement ranked choice voting statewide. There's a lot of data. I'm a data and evidence and best practices person. with a goal of ensuring as many voices are heard and that our elections are as high turnout and as accurate as possible. I've also seen as an administrator that the best way to put any democracy reforms in place effectively in our state is through the ballot initiative process, because it enables voters to become educated and choose for themselves the system they want, and that's what marked our success in 2018 and in 2022. So I've said consistently, if the voters of Michigan want to enact ranked choice voting, my job or the job of the Secretary of State will be to stand by that and make sure that as many people as possible are a part of that process of implementing it, and that we also do a heavy voter education campaign to make sure people understand the change of the process if the voters go in that direction, so that we have informed voters on the other side of that in the implementation side. So it's a heavy lift in terms of education. There's a lot of data that shows it improves democracy and democracy outcomes. The choice of whether to go in that direction is one that I would leave to the voters, and then the job of the election administration community would be to make that real for everyone and ensure everyone knows how to navigate that new process and have their voice heard effectively.
Before we go to the next question over here, Jocelyn, I just have a question for you. This idea of truth, why don't people believe the interim vote? You travel around the state, you're the Secretary of State, you have your finger on the pulse here. What is in the air? Could you have imagined on 9/11 that you would be facing this kind of problem today? Or could you imagine?
Yeah, I think, look, as I say in the book, the truth, sometimes a lie can be halfway around the world before the truth has an opportunity to put its shoes on. And so that's real. And it has, I think misinformation has certainly been weaponized to damage people's trust intentionally.
But why?
In government institutions.
But why?
Was a way of dismantling democracy in a increasingly diverse electorate to keep power in the hands of the few as opposed to in the hands of the many, which is what democracy is about. So to me, there's always been, as long as there's been democracy, there have been strategies to try to lessen it, to try to lessen people's access to it, to suppress voices, or to exclude people from the process. So to me, misinformation is the current iteration of that reality. And it's up to us, as voters, as citizens, to be critical consumers of information and to take that responsibility so that we're making informed decisions and hearing, especially in this era of diminishing access points of trusted information, to find those truthful points and spread them as opposed to spreading misinformation. But probably one of the most challenging aspects of this moment, in addition to the unknowns that AI brings in all of this, is how are we as citizens getting access to accurate information, not just about how our elections work, but everything. And how can we be those critical consumers? How can our education system prepare the next generation to be critical thinkers as well? Because that's what it's going to take to emerge out of this era of misinformation with the truth and our sense intact.
All right, thank you. Yes.
Hi, my name is Mary Fornes from Traverse City, and I want to thank you for your service and your courage. I can't imagine having protesters on my front yard with a 4-year-old son. But I want to ask you about the SAVE Act. So it could affect 21 million voters because you need a passport or a birth certificate, and especially for women who have married and their name has changed. What are your thoughts on that, and what can we do to prevent that?
Well, I think two things. We all can agree that the kernel behind the sort of the nugget of truth within the SAVE Act, which I've spoken out against as something that would rightfully damage the ability not just of millions of married women in the state whose birth certificate doesn't match their current name, or military service members, rural voters, and the list goes on and on about the numbers of folks who would have more difficulty voting if this badly written law would pass. We also can recognize that it's important to ensure only U.S. citizens are voting in our elections, and that we have smart strategic policies in place to continue to make sure that that remains the case in Michigan and nationwide. So I think what we've done and what folks around the country are talking about is implementing policies that would ensure and continue to ensure the accuracy of our voter rolls and the integrity of our elections. But we don't have to sacrifice access to the vote for anyone in order to achieve that goal. The SAVE Act does. But in general, and I believe true nonpartisan election administration does this well, you can truly make it easier to vote and harder to cheat, increasing access to the vote while ensuring security of the process. That's actually what we've done here in Michigan, not just during my tenure, but for a number of years. And in my view, that's the best way to manage a secure and accessible election process.
I have
Thanks.
I have a question. How many fraudulent votes are cast on an?
Very few.
Like
handfuls out of millions.
Handfuls
And
out
they're
of-
caught, and we're putting more procedures in place to catch those votes, not just in Michigan, but nationwide.
Why do we
and then
hear that
prosecute
it's such a
folks.
problem? I mean,
Well, it's a useful tool to pass legislation that would, it's a boogeyman tactic to pass legislation that would make it harder for millions to vote. And again, that's something we've seen throughout history in multiple iterations.
I understand your answer,
Yeah.
I really do. But what I'd like you to do is just talk to the people who don't agree with you, because I think if you could reach them, say, listen, this is why the SAFE Act is not a good idea. What would you say?
I've said time and time again exactly what I just said, which is that good election administration is about making it easier to vote and harder to cheat. This law does neither.
Got it. Okay.
And there's plenty of facts and data points and examples to back that up.
Right. Yes, Dillis.
I'm Lola.
Lola.
Oh, let's see. I work in a local clerk's office, and when the citizens of the state voted that we would have early voting, that was a really intense thing for us to make happen, and I'd like to thank you for your leadership in that. It was really excellent, and I hope that more and more people will use that. But she kind of stole my question about the SAFE Act. But so what can people do? I guess what is the biggest thing that I can do to ensure that the voting is safe?
Well, first, thank you for your service in working as an election worker, because that's really one of the most important things you can do. And then secondly, to really kind of, we will potentially see ballot initiatives on the ballot and circulated around the state. There's a history of people lying about what a ballot initiative would do. And so, be vigilant and on the lookout for fraudulent efforts to collect signatures for initiatives that would actually make it harder to vote, as opposed to actually ensuring the integrity of the process. I think that the lesson of democracy of John Lewis and others is that we have to stay vigilant, because every generation has a responsibility to defend democracy and speak out when we see these attacks, however they come. So continue to be at the forefront. Host forums, conversations, and perhaps coffee hours as well. And I'm happy to join you with this and sort of sharing your story, your experience about managing our elections or working in our elections and how accurate and secure they are. And then continue to answer questions for folks who have doubts, so that they can be invited into the process, have those questions answered, and hopefully with those answers have more faith in the process. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hi. My name is Phil Dutton. I'm from Northport, north of here, and thank you for being here. I'm totally inspired by who you are and what you stand for and how you speak about the issues that you.
Thank you.
Yeah. My question is kind of a dovetail on the SAVE Act issue, and it's kind of a two-part question. The first part of it is we know that there are efforts nationwide to try to reduce the ability to get to vote all across the board, removing polling stations, making them farther apart, making it more difficult, mail-in vote, ballot, all that kind of stuff. Can you talk about other things that you're aware of that may be in the wings in Michigan, or stuff that you're aware of that are making it more difficult in Michigan? And the second part is, do you work with other secretaries of state in their districts to learn what they're going through and support each other?
Yes. So number one of the best other aspects about my job is to get to work with Democrat and Republican secretaries of state around the country who are similarly showing up every day. Cisco Aguilar in Nevada is a great example, and a dear friend who, we sort through problems together, especially as we've faced coordinated attacks on our democracy over the last several years. Having a coordinated response has been really critical to building that solidarity and that strength. Al Schmidt, who's a Republican Secretary of State in Pennsylvania, another great example of a leader who I've been working with to collaborate and identify ways to continue to strengthen the power of democracy and the vote in response to these challenges. And in addition to that, what's coming down the pike is potentially a ballot initiative that would similarly try to confuse voters about our elections and enact policies to make it harder to vote under the guise of I think it's called like a voting rights initiative or something like that. So I think be on the lookout for that. But also I would say what's really important in our elections is having good people in places of leadership at the county and local level. So, and at the election worker level, because the people of democracy has always been its greatest strength. And that's why we see so many threats to those folks today. So one of the other things that it continues to emerge isn't just bad policies or the potential for bad policies that are really headline grabbing and all the rest, but intimidation and threats to these workers. And I'm glad we've passed legislation to make it a crime to threaten an election worker, which we did a few years ago. But really protecting our election workers, volunteering to be one yourself, is one of the most tangible and important and impactful things you can do to continue to protect our democracy.
Yes, over here.
Hi, I'm Justin. And when you look around, you see a lot of sad and negative things that are happening in this country. What makes you hopeful for the future?
You showing up tonight.
Thank you.
It's true. And really all of you showing up, because that's really the most important thing in this moment. Thank you for your question, and thank you for being here, and for all of you, because what this book is about and what history teaches us, whether it's those folks who stood up at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge or who walked to work every day in Montgomery to desegregate the busing system, the best of America and our best policies have always been driven by citizens showing up and demanding a better economy, a better school system, a better transportation system, a better government. That's why I love democracy, because it attaches power to those voices showing up. The most important way out of this moment, and I know it's a dark and challenging time, with misinformation rampant, attacks, threats, challenges, noise, every day, I see it. Believe me, I see it, and deal with it. But the only way out is through, and it's by marching forward anyway, into that sea, into that fire, being the firefighters to put out the fires even when they rage against us, because that's how history teaches us that we've actually been able to survive and thrive and truly make America and Michigan great by showing up, doing the work. And the tactics of moments like this is to cause us to feel like our voice doesn't matter, that we shouldn't show up, that it's too hard or too much or too noisy, and we should just stay in our own corners and not help each other out in this moment. If we do that, we truly lose. But if we stay engaged and we show up and we fight, history teaches us we will win every fight we're in. So don't forget that.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Jan Stacer from Traverse City, Michigan, and I just wondered about what your thoughts on, like, the current administration wants to give the Department of Education back to the states. Well, I personally have grown up all over America, and different education systems have, like, for an example, I moved when I was in 3rd grade from Washington State down to Georgia, and I got to skip a grade because I already knew my multiplication tables. So I'm concerned about how is the Department of Education left up to the states? We're all going to be in different criteria.
Yeah.
How is that going to work?
Well, first I'll start by saying, as the daughter of 2 special
standardization?
education teachers, the cuts at the federal level are really cuts to making sure our students with needs and special needs and in impoverished areas around the country aren't going to get access to the federal and other financial support that they need to have access to quality education. And that is going to hurt all of us in every state. And so one of the things we need to continue to do, and thank you for your question, education is also always, there's always been a role for states in investing in education and better funding our schools. And we do see states around the country passing Michigan with stronger educational systems that we need to build out. And so my hope is that Michigan can become a top 10 state for public education in the future with smart investment and policies to get us there. But there's also a role for the federal government to play as well. So I think continuing to speak out about the importance of that federal funding for education, write your congressmen and women, speak out to your senators, show up at forums like this one, show it to town halls, demand that town halls be held in congressional districts like this one to have these conversations, or have some of your own. But nothing, the power of the people will always be greater than the people in power. Always. So remember that power that you have in this moment and find ways to fight for education or healthcare or access to better utility rates and a number of other things that we need to do to make Michigan, in my view, the best place to raise a kid and be a kid and call home. We've got a lot of work to do, but it always starts and begins and ends with us all raising our voices and not giving up. And staying in the fight, knowing that those who've come before us stayed in the fight so that we could be here today to continue their fight. And that the kids, my son, and the kids that we all know in our lives, our loved ones, they're looking at us now to fight as well, because they will inherit what we do and what we leave behind. So it's on all of us to stay engaged, to find ways to continue to make a difference, whether it's in elections or in other areas, because that's how we can truly ensure that we're doing everything we can with the time we're given to leave this world a little bit better than we found it.
We have time for just two more. We'll go here, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I wanted to come up. I wanted to offer a little bit of a lighter fare than anything politically driven. I'm very impressed with the fact that you've run several marathons, and I really wanted to promote so much that if you haven't already done so, I highly recommend that you enroll in and run the U.S. Marine Corps Marathon in Washington, D.C.
I have. Thank you. It's one of my favorites. I ran the Marine Corps Marathon when my husband was in active duty. And it was one of the most inspiring races I've ever run, because every time you're tired, someone passes you with a sign about they're running for this person who's deployed, or this person who has lost a life, or this family member, or this, and so it was one of the most incredible. I highly recommend it. You end at Iwo Jima, right? I think you end at Iwo Jima, right? If I remember that right. Yeah, it was back in, I think, 2013 or 2012 when I ran it, but it's an amazing race, and I'd love to do it again someday. We'll bring a contingent from Michigan to run it together.
My name is Master Gunnery Sergeant John Brady, U.S. Marine Corps retired.
Thank you for your service, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I think I'm running it down. So my name's Cameron Stefanski. I am turning 32 next week. I'm from Traverse City.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
What's your birthday?
Gemini season.
What's your birthday?
June 11th.
My son is June 12th. There you go.
And my brother's
Gemini.
June 10th, so look at all of us.
There you go.
I love it. I could ask you a million questions, so thank you for your thoroughness tonight and your authenticity. I really appreciate it. I think I could ask you a million questions about LGBTQ plus rights for women, voting rights, rights for all different types of folks, but I think you've covered a lot of that tonight, so I think it'd be good for me to close out with asking you, as a millennial and as a young person, I was in 3rd grade in 9/11, and my generation has seen countless times of tragedy, time after time after time after time again. Fast forward to today with our current administration, and it feels like everything is just collapsing beneath us. And so I am gonna piggyback off of the hopeful question and ask you, what is your coping mechanism or remedy,
I run marathons.
Yes, yes. But yeah, what's your advice to staying in the game, I guess, if you will?
That's what the book's about, really, how you build a life as a warrior, because it's not easy. And it includes losses and wins, but staying the course and building resilience and persevering is really the victory. And then building a community of other warriors who are running, fighting alongside of you, that's critical. But I think for me, what sustains me is knowing throughout my life, and there are stories of this in this book, every challenge, every tragedy, every loss that I've experienced or witnessed has also paved the way to greater strength than I realized I was going to have on the other side. And when you come to see challenges or loss or tragedies as also an opportunity or a path towards growth and strength, you start to be in a position where it never gets easy, but you can start welcoming them. That's the goal for me, at least, that I struggle with as well. But the challenge is to see these challenges as an opportunity to get better, knowing on the other side of them that you will be, and continuing to build that record. An example is our democracy. We've endured a challenging decade for our democracy. We've seen the rise of misinformation, threats at my home and targeting other election officials, division, hateful messages, and the like. But every step of the way, more and more people have voted than ever before, right? We have expanded voting options in this state because more people are paying attention to democracy than ever before. More people are showing up to march and to fight and demand. We may not win every fight, we may not win every election, but we know that by staying in the fight, the moral arc actually does bend towards justice. And all that's really asked of us is to not give up. And to know that at the other side of that we'll be better for engaging in this fight, and that's the win. So that's what gives me hope, that we can always emerge stronger than before. So
that's a great way to end. Thank you, Jocelyn Benson, for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for joining us for the special presentation from the National Writers Series. Coming up Thursday, June 26th at 7 p.m., don't miss an evening with debut Elk Rapids author, Lieutenant Kagan Gill. Gill will be discussing his memoir, Phoenix Revival, the aftermath of naval aviation's fastest ejection. Gill shares the harrowing details of his physical recovery, the emotional toll of over a dozen surgeries, and his battle with prescription drug addiction and undiagnosed brain trauma after surviving the fastest ejection out of a military plane in history. Tickets are available now. Go to nationalwritersseries.org.